but that led me to you. And then I got your book after doing a deep dive into the crop circle phenomenon. And I just thought that your book was so well put together for someone new coming into this. I'd love to just
Yeah.
start. If you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into this.
I'm Karen Alexander. I live in the UK. I first got into prop circles when I was in my early 20s, which is over 30 years ago now. And my initial interest in them was, I think, like everybody, that they just presented this great big huge mystery. And then my sort of interest deepened in them, I was very fortunate to meet a guy called Michael Glickman, who was my mentor for many years. And he was a trained architect and was really interested in the form and the shape and the geometry of the crop circle, which never really come across sacred geometry before, or the fact that geometry could have meaning or that numbers could have meaning. I was completely new to all of that. And I was fortunate then through him to meet people like Jean-Michel, John Martineau, and lots of other people really who have written about geometry over the years. So yeah, and I carried on in his footsteps. We lost Michael in 2020 during the pandemic, and now there's just a handful of us now that sort of work together on drawing the circles and the geometry, and just been totally fascinated by it for all that time.
One of the things that I find interesting about your approach to the whole subject is you definitely touch on the sacred geometry aspects of it. And I can tell that you enjoy decoding, seeing what's there. But something I think is of true value that you really bring is your ability to see how it affects each individual kind of personally. I recently listened to your article that you wrote that Gary King put in the AI voice of Morgan Freeman. That was really beautiful. And I recommend anybody who's listening that hasn't heard that yet to go and give that a listen. I love the way that you talk about how the phenomenon affects the person personally. And you don't get too much into, you don't hang on the who made it. Is it a hoax? Is it not a hoax? How does it affect the individual? Could you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that's something that you really are quite good at.
I guess I use my own experience of it really, and obviously from talking to lots of other people over the years. I've talked to hundreds of thousands of people who have visited circles, who have come to some of the conferences that I've organized over the years, and just listening to how these formations affect people is just incredible because they do affect people in different ways. But also, as you said, listening to the article that I wrote, that there is a thread that goes through it, goes through the experiences, and it really does change people if they allow it to. And that article really came around because I wanted to write it down because it's something that we don't really talk about a lot, I think, about how these sorts of things affect the human being. So it was really important for me to do that. And part of it is also because I have a background in psychology. So I was obviously that the way that all this affects people on a personal level is very interesting to me. But I, in that article, take people through these kind of stages of the way in which first we might come into contact with something like this, but and then the way in which we are drawn into it. And geometry is a big part of the way that we're drawn into it. Crop circles, for a start, here's something that is incredibly beautiful. And they really are when I mean, people see them in photographs and things on the internet, but when you see them in person, it's overwhelming. And because some of them are just so huge. So the average size of a circle in the UK is about 200 feet. It's
Yeah.
and some of them have been as big as 1,000 feet. So it's just incredible when you get to see them in real life. And here, yeah, here is something that shouldn't be there, yet it is. Very often, the way they're placed in the landscape is paired with sacred site, particularly in this country, but not just in this country. And uh, they just, even though they shouldn't be there in any sort of normal way, there is something also when you see them where they really are, they really do feel they should be there. So there's like that paradox to them. And they are incredibly seductive. The mystery is part of that, the mystery of how they get there, who makes them, and so on. But the beauty of them is also incredibly seductive. So are the settings, the deep countryside, as I said, the ancient sites. All of it is designed to draw you in to this
Mm,
experience. And even the way that the geometry is executed on the ground, it's done in a way whereby you have access to most of the spaces inside the crop circle. So instead of, when we draw geometrical exercises, we have intersections that come together. In the crop circles, those intersections are sometimes drawn out so that it creates spaces through which you can walk. And my friend Michael used to call those hospitality portals, which is a really good name for them. Yeah, so everything's designed to draw you in and to get you thinking about the bigger questions of life. I've had some of the most extraordinary conversations inside crop circles over the years, mostly with people that I've never met before, but everybody seems to be drawn to the great mystery of it. And then there are lots of other stages that you might go through. Another one might be when you get to that juncture of, do I carry on and delve more deeply into this, or am I just happy to have been enchanted by it for a little while? And I think either way, it doesn't really matter. I think even if you've allowed yourself to be enchanted by it just for a little while, the effect is usually very positive. And I think we start to think about how desouled the world has become, really. And we've taken all the enchantment and the magic out of it. Even if
right.
just gets you thinking about that, I think that's a net positive. But then, of course, it can go much deeper than that and it can become a two-way thing. So, something else that I wanted to describe in that article was the way in which there seems to be something that's reflective or reflexive about the phenomenon that, that it can, if you allow it to speak to you in many different ways, not just through their appearance and their geometry, but also through experiences of what I would call high strangeness.
Mm,
And again, that's a whole other level of reality, if you like, that we're initiated or inducted into, I think, by phenomena like this. And eventually, I think, even with the sacred geometry side of it, I just think we come to see the world in a whole different way. And I think that's the magic of the phenomenon, really, is that it has this gentle and beautiful way of just getting people to look at reality and their relationship to it in a very different way. And maybe to re-ensoul and re-enchant the world for a lot of people. I think personally, I think it's an amazing phenomenon. It certainly changed my life for the better. That spend some time and don't get caught up in the drama of it. I think that's the other thing. It can be very
mhm.
easy to get caught up in the drama of these things and the endless arguing over, is it real? Is it not real? And all of that. And I just think at the end of the day, if this is not for you, then walk away because it's not for everybody. But for
Yeah.
me, I enjoy living in the mystery of it. I don't have to, for me, it's not a thing about, is it real? Is it something I can prove? Of course it's real because they're there for a start. But I'm just happy to live in the mystery of it and just to be utterly enchanted by it. And through that, it's opened up so many doors, whether it's been the door into things like sacred geometry or lots of other
Mm,
things as well. Meditation, something that this really
yeah.
got me involved in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to get into some of the evidence, if
Yep.
you don't mind, a little bit further down the conversation, because I do find that stuff very
Mm.
fascinating. But I was having this thought the other day that I've been into the UFO phenomenon now for, I guess I found it in 2006. And that kind of crop circle phenomenon, that kind of opened the aperture a little bit further. So I can imagine anybody that sees one of these things and understands that it wasn't there the night before, they see it that morning. You can't help but be bewitched by this
Yep.
phenomenon that has taken place in front of you. No matter what you think, where it came from, it's going to boggle your mind a
Yep.
little bit. But no, I did want to ask this question. What kind of misconceptions do people have about the phenomenon? How do you address those? Do you ever see someone that talks about a crop circle and they don't really know what it means or what it is? Maybe we should start by defining what is a
Okay,
crop
that's a good
circle.
question. So, yeah,
Yeah.
First of all, one of the big misconceptions about crop circles is the fact that a lot of people think that the crops are cut inside the shape, and that's not true. So the crops are laid down, not flat to the ground. Usually the stalks will come up, oh, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 inches, something like that, and then they'll be bent over. They are very often swirled into a circular pattern, though not always. Sometimes the layers in them can be really complex and can create sort of these fantastic effects when you see them from the air with the light. Sometimes they can be knotted or plaited inside. They can have these fantastic swirled standing centers, and sometimes those can be knotted, or they are equally as much of a work of art on the ground very often as they are from the air. So that's one of the misconceptions. Some of the crops are barely damaged. So sometimes you can have a crop circle, say in young barley, and if nobody goes into the crop circle, nobody goes in afterwards and walks around, then very often the barley will recover via phototropism, and it will recover to such an extent that you would barely ever be able to see that it had been there. Obviously, as the crops mature and they essentially dry out, then that's a different kettle of fish, and then they will stay flat. So there's that to it. And as they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So as we were saying before, the average is about 200 feet. One of the largest ones was about 1,000 feet in diameter and contained 409 individual circles. Some
Is that
the
the
Milk
Milk Hill
Hill, yes,
Galaxy?
in 2021.
Maybe
Sorry,
I could show that real quick. Is that
2000. Yeah,
okay?
yeah, please do.
Yeah, let me show that one real quick because I've got that one here. That is one of my favorite ones. Let me know if you see this one. Can you see that now?
Let's have a look. Oh, yes, there, I can see it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
That one is absolutely
it
mind-boggling.
is.
And
Yeah,
so how many circles are in this one?
it's 409. And the largest ones are about 70 feet in diameter. And the really tiny ones are maybe just a foot or a couple of feet in diameter. And yeah, and it appeared overnight. It wasn't there
Overnight.
overnight. Yeah,
So it's a fact this thing was not there the
that's
day
right. Yeah,
before,
yeah.
and
And it had
and then
also,
someone woke
yeah,
up.
it had also rained really heavily the night it appeared,
Oh my
and
god.
it was pristine. There was no mud or anything inside it. It was just, yeah, utterly pristine.
And from the photos I can see, it looks like those circles, the crop in there is pretty tightly
Yeah,
swirled. Is that
that's
correct?
right. Yep, yep. So this was right at the end of the summer in 2001, and
Oh
so the
my
crop
god.
would have been really ripe, almost ready for harvesting. But yeah, they were, yeah, all swirled. I'm not sure whether they were all in the same direction. I couldn't tell you that for sure, but I bet you most of them were. Yeah.
Yeah. And how angry do the farmers get when these things show up?
It's a mixed bag with farmers. Some of them are fascinated by it and are very open to it. Others who have perhaps had quite a few on their land over the years get pretty fed up with it because it can cause quite a lot of damage. Although I have to say most of the damage is probably caused by visitors. But
Big
yeah,
around.
but I think when the farmers realized the scale of this particular one, I think he was just as awestruck as everybody else. It's a pretty awe-inspiring thing to have happen.
That's 1,000 feet
It is, yeah.
diameter.
Yeah,
That is absolutely
it is.
stunning.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Let me ask you a question. Is that the most amazing one you've ever seen, or have you seen some other ones that really baked your
I think,
noodle?
yeah, I've seen many that have baked my noodle, but for sheer scale, I think that one is one that's held up as one of the most iconic crop circles of all time. One of the ones, yeah, that is most iconic. And there've been many others. There was a really iconic one that appeared at Stonehenge back in 1996, which was a Julia set fractal.
Oh, I've got
And
that one too. We've got to know that
yeah,
one as well.
yeah,
I
which
love that
was,
one. Was the
yeah,
Julius
it
set?
was just
I
incredible.
had that one up. That was yeah, right outside Stonehenge, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
there it is. Yeah, that was
Across the street from Stonehenge?
yeah, literally across the road. And that This one is 151 circles in this circle. There's an interesting story about this one that a group of tourists had gone flying over Stonehenge. I think it was in the late afternoon, the day that it appeared. It was the 7th of July, 1996. And when they had gone out and flown over Stonehenge, they didn't see this crop circle at all. And it wasn't until they were coming back about 45 minutes later that they actually spotted this in the field. There's a big question mark as to whether this circle appeared in broad daylight in a very short period of time. But it was visited by so many people, with it being literally across the road from Stonehenge, everybody could see it. I think the farmer had to just give in and let everybody visit because he wasn't going to be able to keep them out. There was a friend of mine actually took a survey with a theodolite in this crop circle. And one of the things that was really interesting about it was that where the larger circles are, that's where the highest ground was. So the other thing that another misconception is when you see the crop circles in an aerial photograph like this, that you think that the ground is flat when it isn't at all.
Undulating.
It's like it undulates. And this one, yeah. So where the ground was the highest, the circles were the biggest. And then as the ground would fall away, then the circles would get smaller. It's just another fascinating kind of detail, if you like.
And I think that's significant as far as the evidence is concerned, because creating one of these things in the dark on a flat ground is hard enough.
Yeah.
But now you're talking about the ground is undulating. By the time you would finish it looking from above, it wouldn't look perfect. It
No.
would look discombobulated and disorganized. But these are undeniably aesthetically pleasing
Yeah.
when you take these aerial photos.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important piece there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this one was originally thought to be a Fibonacci spiral, but as you look deeper, it was a Julia set. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. Fire is something that we find in a lot of crop circles. So I think the original thought was, oh, I wonder if this might be a golden section spiral, but it wasn't. It was
Mhm.
actually a Julia set fractal. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Could you explain that to everybody? What is a Julia set?
Gosh, fractal shapes are essentially, they're like self-replicating, self-similar shapes that repeat over and over again. And the Julia set, I believe, comes from mathematical equations to do with chaos theory. They're repeated, yeah, the sort of equations are repeated over and over again, and on a computer you can generate these images. Fractal geometry is not a new thing. Simple fractals have been known about for a very long time, but modern, more complex fractals is a relatively sort of new part of geometry. We also had a Mandelbrot set back in 1991 near Cambridge. In fact, very close to where Mandelbrot studied. That's been one. We've had other fractals as well. The Coke snowflake fractal as well. We've had as a crop circle. Yep. It's very interesting that the fact that we would be presented with all of this. But to me, the fractal formations speak to the connectedness of all things and also that relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. And also to do with time. There's something about infinity or the idea of everything being in the moment almost. There's something about that to them as well. So I think they're really interesting on that level. And they are incredible starting points for conversation or theory and ideas. But again, for me, they speak to that idea of the interconnectedness of all things and that everything essentially comes down to number, shape, and geometry.
Was number. I had this thought the other day. It's great to decode the crop circles, but what do you think about, could it be that whatever it is, and I'm just going to go out and say this, I don't think these are all man-made. So whatever it is that is creating these things, is it just trying to get us our attention? Is it just trying to say, maybe your reality isn't quite what you see every day? And to piggyback off of that, when did these kind of start, or when were these really being noticed? Did these go back? And that's probably a point of contention, I'm sure, but they come up every year, right?
Yes, they do. Yep.
This is
Yep.
So I'm sorry, that just boggles my mind. So they're coming up every year. They're there. And then, so what does it mean? What do people think? Is it just there to get us our attention and say, hey, there's a little bit more going on here? What do you think about all that?
I think they're definitely out to get our attention. I just think the magnitude of them and the regularity with which they appear is definitely saying, look at me. But there are so many different ideas. First of all, let's look at the question of how long have they been going on. There are two schools
Right.
of thought with this. So the first school of thought that is that this has been going on for a very long time. And certainly there are records of circles appearing in crop fields that go back a long time.
Mm.
Certainly, some farmers that I've spoke to talk about even their grandparents talking about them and telling them about them. So this goes back quite a way. So one school of thought would say that maybe they started, I don't know, maybe as early as certainly recorded formations in the sort of maybe in the 19th, 20th century. But there is another school of thought that this goes back a lot further than that. There's a very famous woodcut called the Mowing Devil, which I think dates back to the 1600s, which shows a devil mowing a circular patch in a field. And there's a little story that goes with it that the farmer was looking for some farm hands to help him bring his crop in. And when he found out how much they wanted to be paid for this, he said, better the devil mow it than me pay you that. And this became made into a woodcut. Some people think that some of the old henges, circular henges in the UK could perhaps be part of what was going on as well. And just the whole idea of, as well of marking the landscape in some way. We've been marking the landscape in Britain for thousands and thousands of years, whether it shaping the landscape with barrows and bell barrows and things like this, or maybe the chalk white horse at Uffington, which is
Mm.
thousands and thousands of years old. So it's very interesting. Maybe in some way you could say that the crop circles are mimicking that in some way, or maybe the two things have grown up together, if you like, over time. So I don't think there's enough evidence one way or the other to say with any definition which one of those is true. But what I think you can say is that as we began to pay more attention to them, particularly from the mid to late 70s, that their numbers started to increase. So again, one is asking the question,
Mm.
is this reflexive or reflective? Is this somehow interactive with human consciousness? It's an interesting question to ask. But yeah, so that's the kind of the answer about how long has it been going on. I think as for the ultimate meaning of it, there have been many ideas over the years. These designs have been shown to people from native cultures who recognize them as messages from Mother Earth, for instance. So
Mm.
there's a school of thought that crop circles are somehow generated by the Earth itself, which is a very interesting idea. There
Mhm.
are others who like to go the extraterrestrial hypothesis, or maybe the ultra terrestrial hypothesis. So there's lots of that ideas, lots of those ideas as well. Personally, I just think that whatever is going on here, that there is something somehow that is connected to it that has to do with some sort of consciousness. And
Mm.
however you want to describe that is entirely up to you. I prefer actually not to describe it.
Only a safe way to be.
Yeah, I also think it just stops you from making assumptions about it as well.
Mhm.
But yes, I there is definitely something that, even if it doesn't come from the crop circles themselves, there is something that kind of gets in there between human consciousness and whatever it is that's going on in the fields.
Right.
And people can have a connection to it or an experience with it or even an ongoing relationship with it. Again, my friend Michael would often talk about nudges and winks that he would get from the circles themselves when he was trying to work them out or trying to understand them. Ideas would come to him and he'd no idea where it came from. I do think that they enable a connection to one's creativity. They do attract very creative people to them, whether that's geometers, mathematicians, or artists. Even musicians are very drawn to this because there is something incredibly creative about it. And I do think that contemplating the circles, whether that's just looking at them or meditating upon them, can be an access doorway into that incredibly creative state of mind that we all have somewhere inside us. And again, it also, I think, gets us involved in the idea of looking for a universal philosophy of things. And as you said very well, this idea that reality is not the way that we currently think that it is much more, using those words again, reflexive, reflective, that we're not entirely passive. We're not object and subject in the way that we like to think that we are, that actually we have a relationship to reality that is not
Yeah.
very well understood. And I think phenomena like crop circles or even the UAP phenomena, when you get into the high strangeness aspects of it, you start to read people like Patrick Harper or John Keel or even John Mack, you begin
Right.
to realize that actually there's something going on here. There's some fundamental part of what it is to be human that we don't currently understand very well, and that actually we cut away from our experience of what it is to be human.
Right.
And I think crop circles can equally be a catalyst for that, but they're also a symptom of it in some way as well. It goes back to that idea, the chicken or the egg, which comes first. And I think there's an element of that to the crop circle phenomenon as well. Are they a catalyst for change, or are they a symptom of change? And I think the answer is that they're both. And again, that's another thing I think that phenomena like these teachers, it's not a this or. It is a both and reality. These things get into your dreams. I dream a lot about crop circles because I spend a lot of time with them. And I've had the article that I wrote that you read came to me in a dream. And I woke up one night and I'd been dreaming about the phenomenon, and suddenly there they were, these ideas for writing this. It's not going to allow me to sleep. So I get up and I write it down. And then it's a process of refinement and really thinking deeply and hard about this to shape it all into the ideas that they became. I think the crop circles also don't just speak to us in through their geometry and their shape, but they have a body language. They're almost a non-verbal kind of communication as well, we talked earlier about their placement in the landscape. So that not just, for instance, that a lot of them are in sacred sites or areas around sacred sites, but some of them have significant dates and places. There was this amazing formation back in 2008 that was shaped like a huge infinity symbol, which is like the figure eight. And that appeared on the 8th of the 8th, 8th of August, 2008. So there's some of that going, that lovely kind of trickster element as well to
A
all
sense
of
of
this.
humor in there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a sense of humor with this. It's incredibly playful.
Sure.
And again, one of the things that my friend Michael would say is that the crop circles are put there like toys on the nursery floor just to see what we'd make of them. And he would have
Yeah.
seen it as how we respond to it as like an IQ test, really. Are you really getting this? Or
Right.
are you not? Um, he also said crop circles were mirrors in which we could polish our souls, which is very deep, but I think very true.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about a subject like this is that you can dip your toe in as far as you like. You can either dip your toe in and enjoy that and walk away from it, or you can tear off all your clothes and dive in. It does depend on you, the extent to
Yeah.
which you want to go with this. And again, I just think there's something really beautiful about that it's not as shocking or something that is an unpleasant or shocking kind of experience.
Right.
I do think it does, once it gets to a certain level, it presents us with a certain level of cognitive dissonance, because it is
Understandable.
presenting us with ideas that are difficult for people to take on board sometimes. I do think
Okay.
that very often people come to a crossroads with it where again, we come to the idea of, are they real or not? Are they man-made or not? And again,
Could that be the point maybe, or one of the points to stretch your mind to the point where you're gonna go as far as you're gonna
yeah,
go? And maybe just to get people thinking. I often wonder, are we in a way rendering them ourselves by just being there, being aware of them? And then maybe it's feeding us a little bit more because of the people that are there. I know that's a topic that's coming out more in the UAP topic
mhm,
now. And I think Dr. John Mack did a good job of explaining that, as well as John Keel.
yeah,
It's funny you mentioned John Keel. I'm just about to finish his book, Operation Trojan Horse, which
yeah,
is touching on that a little bit in the
yep,
book. It has an intimate relationship with the person observing it, or a group of people observing it.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's very interesting.
There is something completely symbiotic about it that, as I say, I think it responds on so many levels to the people that pay attention to it. I think the crop phenomenon so far was probably at its height from 2009 to 2012. And then numbers have slowly declined since then, although they did uptick again last year. And I wonder whether some of that is because people are looking again at this because of what's been going on with the UAP stuff, particularly in America. I think that's interesting if people start to pay more attention to it. Maybe we'll see a little bit more
Sparks it.
going on in the fields.
Yeah. Could we talk about the placement of them a little bit?
Yep.
There's a lot in Wiltshire, right? A
Yes.
lot of these, there's a high concentration there. They do pop up around the world, but for one reason or other, we see a high concentration in Wiltshire. Can you talk about some of maybe the theories or why that could be? There's obviously ancient sites there, which may have a connection. I've heard the ley line connection
Yep.
or underground aquifer. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those and what people feel.
Yep. So it is interesting. The placement of them is interesting. There have been a lot in Wiltshire over the years, and the other county is Hampshire as well. But there's central southern England and also into Sussex as well. So that's going eastward. They have appeared all over the UK, really. I mean, there is a lot of grain grown in those areas. There are, as you say, a lot of chalk aquifers where there is underground water in those areas too. So those might be some physical kind of reasons. Crab circles are also placed in very interesting ways. So, like we were saying about the Stonehenge formation, where the largest circles are on the higher ground. With the Milk Hill formation in 2001, that was on the highest point in Wiltshire.
Were
So,
you there? That was the video, right?
no, that's the one we looked at earlier, the really big one.
Oh, the Milk Hill
Yeah.
Galaxy. Okay. I
So,
was thinking of the other one where you have the video.
oh, yeah. So
Yeah, go ahead. Talk
yeah,
about
so
this one.
that was on the highest point in Wiltshire. So on the highest ground there. Their placement is also important because sometimes it's really in sync with the landscape. For instance, and I first noticed this a long time ago. I think it was back in maybe the mid-90s. I was visiting a circle at a place called East Meon in Hampshire, not too far from where Steve and I live now. And we walked into the crop circle from the side of the field. And as I walked into the circle and then turned around to look. We'd walked along a tractor line. So in the UK, we don't spray fields from the air because it's not big enough. Our countryside isn't big enough. So the fields are sprayed with tractors, and they have two huge booms that come out either side, and they go up and down the field. So they leave these kind of tractor lines where you have these two sets of two lines going up and down the field. So we walked into the circle through along one of these tractor lines. And as I looked back, I saw that this particular tractor line was aligned with a gap in the trees at the side of the field. And it was almost, the placement of it was just uncanny. And it was as if it had been placed there for some reason with that in mind. And there've been others as well. There was a beautiful crop circle, again, it's not far from Stonehenge. It was in 2002, and it was this huge design that had 6 ribboned arms, really beautiful design. And this one was placed in a field where there were several round barrows in the field. And each one of these arms, these 6 arms, either touched one of these barrows or they touched the edge of a tram line that went down the edge of the field, or it was just placed in that field where it was touching each of these things without it impeding on the design itself.
Maybe I
And
could share that one real quick. I think it's this one right here. Is that this one?
that's the one.
Yeah.
So you can see there that each of the sort of the arms there
Mm.
touches or kisses the various things that are going on in the field. And that must have been placed there knowing that. Because the odds of you
I mean,
placing
yeah.
something on that scale in that field without it looking odd or cutting something off somehow must be a million to one. Again, you look at that and you think that's utterly deliberate. And again, that I think that just shows that it's been placed with
Mm.
intelligence, of some kind of thought. So again, that there's that sort of thing going on as well. Um, in other countries, I know that you've had circles in the US, not particularly recently, I don't think, but they've been at
Mhm.
places like Serpent Mound in Ohio and other
Uh,
sacred sites in the US. It's the same in Europe as well, in places like Germany, where they have many standing stones like we do in the UK. They've been placed
okay.
there too. And again, I think they're making a connection, I think, between the past and the present. And certainly when you start to dig into the geometry of sacred sites, particularly stone circles, you find that a lot of the canon of number that you find in those sites, you will find in the modern day crop circles. So it's almost, yeah, like attracts like. That
Yeah.
again, that idea of relationship going on there. Places like Stonehenge and also Avebury, which is actually the largest stone circle in England, is a very popular site over the years for crop circles. Yet again, drawing our attention to the ideas that underpinned those sites, which is why for me crop circles are temporary temples. They're modern day sacred sites, if you like, because
Mhm.
they embody so much of what our older ancient sites embody as well. Even to looking at sometimes crop circles mimic what's going on in the sky. So we had a total solar eclipse here in 1999, and there were crop circles that referenced that year. But there was also one year we had a transit of Venus across the face of the sun, and there was a
Mhm.
formation that referenced that too. And again, research now shows that a lot of our ancient standing stone sites were to do with the link between astronomy and geometry on the ground. It is fascinating. But for me, it's not just about calling our attention to those things, but it is about that idea of the connectedness of all of these things
Mhm.
together. And that idea, those kind of philosophies going all the way back to Plato and maybe even before Plato, this golden thread through time. You go even going back to ancient Egypt and the way that some of those their temples were built, with the rising and setting of sun on solstice and so on. And again, some of the geometry at Stonehenge that Jean-Michel has written about so eloquently, we find in crop
Yes.
circles all the time. In fact, there was a really beautiful crop circle a couple of years ago, 2019, I think. It was a place called Clearwood in Wiltshire,
Right.
and the geometry inside of that was directly linked to the geometry at Stonehenge, which was not so far away. So again,
Squaring of the circle.
yeah, squaring of the circle is something else that we find. That's astonishing, actually. A lot of our understanding of that comes from the work of a geometer called Alan Brown, who again worked with John
Yeah.
Michel on his book How the World is Made. And he showed that a lot of crop circles contain squaring the circle in ways that actually we'd not thought about, and new
Mm.
ways as well as older ways. But it's very common. Look back at the symbolism of that. So in traditional cultures, the circle was representative of the divine. It represented the perfection of the design. It was unity. And the square was about material reality and the 3D world, because the square produces the first 3D shape, which is the cube. So that relationship between the divine and material reality, or the soul and the body, it's that myth, that relationship between the ineffable and the material, I think, is what that is drawing our attention to. And again,
Yes.
that the fact that you find it, that it's so common in the crop circles, I think, is just astonishing.
Yeah. I don't want to veer off too much here, but I would like to just pay homage to Jean-Michel real quick. I just discovered Jean-Michel in about the past 3 months, but
Okay.
I've read Dimensions of Paradise
Yep.
and I'm about to start Crooked Solid. But that diagram that he made based off of Stonehenge and the New Jerusalem, where he's connected that to the Earth and Moon squaring of the circle, that absolutely blew my mind when I saw that. And then when I started to realize that some of that is found within the crop circles, I was like, okay, something is clearly going on here.
Yep.
It's a wink to the world that you're living in. But I just wanted to bring that up. Can I ask you, did you meet Jean Michel when he was alive?
Many times. And
Oh wow.
yeah,
What was he like?
he was a dear man. He was how can I describe? He was fiercely clever, but in a wise way. And his understanding of things like ancient measure, so units
Mm,
of measure used in the ancient world, and also the connection between geometry and astronomy, was just out of this world. And if you've not seen it and not read it, then you really should read his book, How the World is Made According to Sacred Geometry. It's a really big book. It was his final work, and
That's on the list.
encompassed kind of all his major findings. He was funny too. He had incredible sense of humor, and yeah, he was a great man. Yeah.
Very interesting. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something earlier in the conversation about the hitchhiker effect.
Yeah.
When certain people enter the crop circle, they may take things home with them, whatever they may be. Do you have any experiences like that, or do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, a couple. I think one of them I wrote about in that article was about hearing a strange sound in my house. And it was back in the summer of 1993. And during that year, I had been working with a group of other researchers, and we were looking into this idea of, was there a connection between what was going on in the fields and human consciousness? And so we devised a whole set of kind of experiments which we carried out, and actually culminated in the appearance of a crop circle. But that that summer I was deeply invested in it psychologically, and was thinking about it a lot. And in fact, strange sounds are sometimes heard in crop circles. They've been also recorded in them as well. There's actually one very famous one, which one of the early researchers, Colin Andrews, was being interviewed by the BBC inside a crop circle, and they heard this electrostatic kind of sound, and it actually ruined the equipment of the cameraman and the sound man that were there.
Wow.
But it'd been heard it other times before too. And so one afternoon, I was stood in my kitchen, and I was washing up, as you do, and I was looking out into the garden, and all of a sudden I just became aware that I could hear like this kind of electrical static kind of noise. And at first I just thought it was something I wasn't hearing properly that was in outside. And I thought maybe it was a car alarm or something that was going on that I could just about hear. And as I stood there, I began to realize that whatever it was getting louder and louder. And so I dry my hands and I think, what the hell is that? And I had a friend staying with me who was actually taking a bath at the time, but my bathroom was on the ground
Mm.
floor, so I was able to call out and say, "Can you hear that?" And they said, "Yeah, I can. What is it?" And I said, "I don't know." So I decided I would walk out the back door and just see if I could hear what it was more clearly. And as soon as I took a step outside, I realized that the noise wasn't outside at all. It was actually in the house. So I came back into the house, and all the time it was getting louder and louder. And it was just getting to the point where I was starting to feel slightly frightened by it.
Mm.
And I was looking around. The TV wasn't on, the radio wasn't on. There was nothing on in the house. And then all of a sudden, it just stopped dead. And it was even more astonishing when it stopped. So for suddenly to just stop like that. And I was just, what do you make of something like that? It's so hard to rationalize something like that, isn't it? So, but I just felt that I was, as I say, psychologically invested in what was going on at the time, that I just maybe acted as an antenna for it. Like almost,
Something.
yeah, like a strange attractor or something for it. But I don't sort of various experiences over the years with this. Another really weird one was seeing a cube in my bedroom. And I was just in bed one night. I was laid on my side and I wasn't asleep yet. I was awake and I looked down toward the bottom of the bed and I could see what was a black cube, which looked about 2 feet by 2 feet.
Oh,
And it was, I was really shocked by it. And I sat bolt right up in bed, as you would, because here
yeah.
is something that really shouldn't be here. And within seconds, this thing, I tell you, it's very hard to explain, but it moved towards me and it shrunk down to nothing, shrunk up, shrunk down to nothing, shrunk, and then went straight into my chest. And I sat there almost hyperventilating. And I was I was actually quite frightened and I did not
Imagine.
go to sleep for a long time after that, I can tell you. But again,
Yeah.
what do you make of something like that? I don't know. It's just one of those experiences that you just think this definitely happened, but I
Yeah.
don't ask me what it means or what it was because I really don't understand. I thought the symbolism of it was interesting.
The cube.
It- that was interesting, but yeah, it's just one of those things where you just have to shrug your shoulders and shake your head. And then, of course, you berate yourself because you think, well, you should have had more presence of mind and done something or said something
But
in the
what could
moment.
you possibly make of something like, right?
Yeah,
In those
exactly.
moments,
Yeah.
in a moment like that, you would just be stunned,
Yeah. Yeah. Which I
and
was. Yeah.
as most people are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's probably why you hear that a lot in the UAP field as well. When people see something, they're like, "Why didn't you video it?" You're probably just completely struck
Yeah. You
by
are.
what you're
You're
looking at.
struck
You're just,
dumb by it. You really are. Yeah.
yeah, what am I looking at here? You're not in your mind. You're probably not. Oh, I should get my camera out right now and videotape this UFO that's flying over. You
Yeah.
can't believe what's going on.
Yeah.
That you're just stunned.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can imagine that is a little earth shattering.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'd love to do, if you have some time, I've got some photos of some crop circles and some formations and some stories that go along with. Maybe we could look at those and talk through them if you have a few minutes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to prep everybody with this one. This is so I think it was in the early 70s, Carl Sagan and is it Francis Drake sent out the binary code from the
Yep.
Arecibo Observatory.
Yep.
And
Yes. I'm not sure who the
then
characters were, but yes, that happened. Yep.
yeah, so they sent out, so I want to just share the binary code they sent out. I think it was in 1974, just to prep everybody with this story here. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Let me know when you can see this.
Yep.
Okay, so this was a binary code that they sent out in I think it was 1974 from the Arecibo. Here it is, 1974 November,
Yep.
from the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. And get, do you know what some of this code is and where they sent it to?
So I think I'm not sure where it was sent out to. I know some of the code refers to how the message was sent. So at the bottom there, in purple, is that's to do with the satellite. Sorry, the dish it was sent from. I think
Mhm.
then obviously the little red guy is meant to be to represent human beings.
Human
I
being.
think there's something to do there with maybe DNA the DNA
Yes, in the middle, I believe.
sequences. Yep. And then maybe something to do with the composition of life on Earth as well, i.e., carbon based life. And maybe even I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure it's in there somewhere, is our position in the solar system. So where the
Right.
location of Earth as well. So I think all of that is wrapped up in there somewhere.
And then miraculously, in was it 2001, I think it was,
That's right.
a crop circle appears in England, correct?
That's right.
And let me see if I can find that one here. I believe that's right here. Let me see. Yep, here we go. So then this comes back 27 years later. Is that right? My math is correct or something about that.
Yep, something like that.
Um,
Yep.
and this is near a different observatory or a different telescope. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, this is near the Chilbolton Radio Telescope in Hampshire. Yeah, in the UK. Yeah.
And
So
this
this
is
is
also
obviously, yeah,
binary.
it is. And
Okay.
also this is upside down compared to the other one. So
Oh,
there's a little bit of that going on there. But what you can see at the top there of the picture that you're looking at is the bit that
mhm,
corresponds in the other one to the method of transmission. So in the
mhm,
Arecibo message, the transmission is the dish, the Arecibo dish. Whereas in this
mm,
one, it's actually a crop circle. And that
mm,
crop circle design had appeared, I think, maybe the year or 2 years before at the Arecibo telescope, sorry, at the Chilbolton Radio Telescope. So that's sort of there. And then you can see he's upside down, but you can see the little guy there who's got a bigger head and a smaller body.
yes,
Um,
right there in the
and
middle.
and yeah, that's him. And then there are some other details which seem to suggest, I think, and I didn't do this decoding, but that they were more silicon-based life form rather than
Right.
a carbon-based life form. And there was something about their location, but I don't remember offhand the
Mhm.
detail of that. Yeah, and
Was
so
there another formation there as well that
yep,
happened at the same time with the face?
that's right. Yeah, then there was a face in a box, which was
I think
made.
I have that one.
It was made from, like, the face itself
Oh,
was
no.
made up of these kind of, it was done like a dot matrix printer where you had larger and smaller dots that kind of made up the face.
Maybe this is the one. Nope, that's not the one. I
That's
must have
not one.
lost it. But yeah, saw that one there as well. I thought that was fascinating also.
Yeah,
And that one popped up overnight as far as we know.
as far as we know, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
highly complex, shows up overnight, clearly a response to something that was sent out 20 some years later. If that's a hoax
Or a
and you didn't get
reference,
paid
yeah,
off
or a reference to it. Yeah,
or a
yeah. I
reference
mean,
to it.
even if it's not, yeah. And again, I tend to think that with a lot of these types of phenomena, that to take them too literally is not always a good idea.
Mm,
And so my approach to that would be, yeah, definitely we need to see the differences. But then I'd be looking at the idea that maybe what's being communicated here is the idea that the crop circles themselves are a form of message from something or somewhere. So yes, I I would be I wouldn't take it flat literally. I would
right.
be looking at the again the sort of the subtleties, the body language, if you like, of it.
One other question I had, I heard this and I haven't found anything else to back this up, but is it true that there are black helicopters that sometimes fly around the formations, observing them? Is that lore or do you know if that's something that actually does happen?
No, I think it does happen, but I don't know the intent of that because the thing
Okay.
that people have to understand is that Wiltshire is home to Salisbury Plain, which is the largest military training and testing range in the UK. So there are always there's always military stuff going on. You can sometimes hear the guns going on Salisbury Plain in the Wiltshire countryside. I've seen helicopters come in and look at crop circles, definitely. I've seen that, been in the field
Mm,
when it's happened. But
okay.
again, it's so hard to tell what they're doing. Are they there just because they're training and they're using it as a target, or are they just
Mhm.
curious like the rest of
Right.
us, or are they there to observe? It's very It's difficult to know. But yes, it
Right.
happens, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure. So there's another one, I'm sure highly controversial that I'd love to talk about. You might know what I'm about to pull up here. And this one was in your book towards the end. Actually, you know what? I want to show the face real quick. I have found the face. Here it is. So just so everybody knows, this one showed up right next to the possible response to the binary code. This was right there. And do you know how big this one was?
It's probably between 150 and 180 feet on the longest side, somewhere. I don't know the exact, but looking at the distance between the tractor lines, it looks about that.
And is the crop woven there?
Yeah, it's made up of standing shapes of various different sizes. So some of the really
This-
small ones towards the center are just like tiny standing tufts of wheat, whereas some of the others are obviously bigger shapes. And you can see that they're not, some of them look circular, but they weren't actually circular. I think they had a sort of a slightly sort of diamond shape to them. But
Right.
fascinating how it was done. And it looks
Yeah,
amazing as well. It's almost
that
like the way they used to do photos in newsprint, where they would use a dot
right.
matrix to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, very fascinating. Yeah, there's one or two more I'd like to pull up here. Let me see if I can find this one. I think it's right. Where is that one? Oh, no. Oh, where did you go? Like out of here. Ah, here it is. So this one, very interesting. Also binary code in that circle. Is that correct?
I don't think it is binary. I think it might have been ASCII, something like that. So I'm not
Int-
sure what the code was, but I don't think it was binary.
And where did this
So
one pop up?
ASCII, something like that, something ASCII code.
Yeah.
Um,
This was 2002.
it was,
And
yeah.
where was this one?
It was a place
And
called
where?
Sparsholt in Hampshire.
Okay.
And you can see there that it's near a radio, near a, it's near a radio mast there, which you can
Ah,
just
yeah.
see on the side of the photo there. And
Right.
I went inside this particular crop circle.
Oh gosh. Massive.
It was big, but it was just unfathomable at ground level. You had no idea what you were standing in at all. And
Oh,
the
it's
design itself was made of lots of lines, and some were wider than others. That's how the design was made to give that sort of light and shadow. It was just incredible. And it
is
was,
that is that's insane
yeah,
to
it
do
was
that with
also,
rock.
yeah, it was also just, I don't know, it was like fizzing. It's very hard to put into words, but it was like fizzing with energy. It was,
You felt it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Is that something that happens in other crop circles, or is this one kind of special that you were feeling that?
It does happen in other circles. People have all kinds of feelings inside the formations, but this one to me was just, it just felt really energetic. I'd say it's hard to put into words how it feels, but yeah, yeah, fizzing.
And what did you say you said that this was decoded because I saw
That's
this in
right.
your book that you had the
Yeah,
words here. And what was how was it decoded? You said this wasn't binary. What did you call it?
I think it was ASCII code. ASCII,
ASCII.
ASCII, ASCII code. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then, do you remember off the top of your head what the code stood, or I could
Well,
pull it up?
I think it said something like, "We oppose deception," and
Yes,
then it said, oh gosh, this is a test
I've
now.
got it here. Beware the bearers of false gifts
Yeah,
and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time, believe. There is good out there. We oppose deception.
that's right. Yeah,
What do you make? That's pretty wild. That not only how big this thing is, what it looks like. There's clearly a face there that is, I'm just going to say this, it's non human.
yeah.
And then you have this language that has been decoded, and that's the message. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's just mind blowing, isn't it? And I think the message is very interesting. That idea of almost keeping the faith with something, I think is very interesting. I think the face itself is fascinating because for me, this crop circle was all about the idea of the other and how do we see it, and also the importance of putting a face to something. And I found it, as a crop circle, I found it incredibly confronting compared to a lot of them, which are very normally crop circles that they're mandala like, they're beautiful, there's a gentleness to them. Whereas this is really in your face. If you want a partner, the answer is I don't know what to make of it. There are some people who will literally take that as being a message from a gray alien. And
Right.
and maybe they're right. I don't know.
There's no
Um,
way to know.
there's no way to know. And for me, again, I have a really open mind about it. I think it could be exactly what it purports to be, or I think there's something playful about it as well. The image itself, again, it's confronting, but there's also that playful element to it as well. It's really interesting because I didn't get to fly over that one, and my other half, Steve, was in the helicopter that day flying that one,
Yes.
and he didn't even know what it was. He said he came down and from the flight, and he said, I've been flying over this really strange crop circle. He said, I really don't know what it is. And it was in the days when we were shooting on film. So we had to take the film to be
Brilliant.
developed. And when we got the prints back, I was just astonished. And I don't think he saw it at first. And I said, look at this, look what it is. But he said at the time he was doing the flight, he was just concentrating on trying to get the photography done and get it right and everything, that
Right.
he just didn't even see the design, which I just thought was interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of people get some real ontological shock when they start to look at something like that as well. They might really, because as I say, there's something quite confrontational about it. But it is an interesting message as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm always weary of people that say, "This is what it is." I'm very skeptical of people that say, "I know what this was." How could you possibly? You're dealing with something that is so mysterious, so anomalous. You have no idea what
No.
that's from. All you can see is the evidence and then how it maybe affects you and how you think about it.
Yeah, and again, talking to other people who have spent time looking at it or actually went inside it. There are lots of people who went inside that one.
They all felt that
Yeah,
that sort of static.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing that formation carries is it carries a hell of a lot of power. It's incredibly powerful
And
as an image. Again, you compare it to other circles. There's something that sets it apart from many other crop circles. It's powerful, it's confronting, it's stark, but it's also playful. Maybe those are qualities of NHI.
Mhm. Yeah. Karen, I want to respect your time, and I really want to thank you for chatting with me today. I've really been looking forward to this for a very long time. I want to thank you very
I'm so
much.
sorry we didn't get to do it sooner.
No, it's fine. I'd love to have another conversation with you sometime if you're open to it.
Yep, sure, that's no problem. Yep.
Fantastic. Do you have any future plans? Anything in mind for your website, Temporary Temples? Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find us at www.temporarytemples.co.uk. That has everything on there, really. It has an image library that goes back to 1994, and it's all free to go and have a look at, to go and see all the different shapes and places that these things have appeared. And it's got hundreds and hundreds of crop circles, so you'd be there for days looking at them all. I do run some online courses. We do some drawing, and we also look at the consciousness side of the crop circles. So there are, and I do those with Jeff Fitzpatrick. So
Mm.
they're called Crop Circle Explorers. And I do various bits and pieces online, sometimes do lectures online. We have an annual online conference as well. And you can get our Crop Circle yearbooks there, which we've been publishing since 1999, every year since then. And they showcase the best of the circles from each individual year. And then I do a little bit of writing in them about generally about the phenomenon, but then also particularly about the circles that are in the books. So that's how and where to find it.
Yeah. And I'd like to just point out one thing. This happens so often that you have a yearbook that
Yeah,
every year these things are popping up and you have a yearbook. I just want to, that is mind blowing.
it is. Yeah. That's the other thing that you have to bring into the equation when you're looking at, the possible origins of this is just how long it's been going on, its longevity.
Yeah. Mind boggling stuff here, Karen. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate your time. Keep up the great work. I'm utterly fascinated. Thank you.
Thank you.